So our fourth session today is about the Great Schism and also about the Norman Conquest. The Holy Spirit is one of the persons of the Holy Trinity and is one in essence with the Father. Orthodox Christians repeatedly confess, "And I believe in the Holy Spirit, the Lord, the giver of life, who proceeds from the Father, who together with the Father and the Son is worshipped and glorified." That comes from the modern website of the Orthodox Patriarchate of Constantinople. And what strikes you about that? Well, you may well have noticed that I said proceeds from the Father. Whereas when we say the Creed, we say proceeds from the Father and the Son. The phrase "and the Son" is given a particular tag coming from the Latin, and it's called the filioque. Filioque. This first appears, well, as far as we can tell, in a written form in the write-up from the Council of Toledo in 400. This wasn't a council of the whole church, not like those ecumenical councils. It was an area council for the Spanish church. But in the write-up, there's a declaration of faith, and it includes the words "proceed from the Father and the Son." Patriarch Paul II of Constantinople challenged the Pope for using the term in 650, but he was also challenging the Pope for his other views, particularly the one where he thought the Pope believed that there was only one will in Jesus. And we've heard about the working out of the idea of there being two wills. This phrase, "and the Son," was used regularly in Charlemagne's court from 800 onwards. And it was used because the Franks believed it was the original version. It had been around in that region since before 400. It's how the Creed was known to them. They couldn't believe that it wasn't the Creed, but it wasn't being used that in Rome. And so Pope Leo, not wanting to fall out with Charlemagne, said it's fine to use it privately, but it's not part of public liturgy. Like that was going to work. And so it was used, and it was used more and more widely until eventually it was added to the Creed used in public services in Rome in 1014. In 1054, a papal legate was sent by the Pope to Constantinople to demand that the Patriarch there recognise the Pope as the head of the Universal Church, and so had the right to add this. The Eastern Church was saying, but it's not in the Creed. It's never been in the Creed. We've had this Creed for this length of time. There hasn't been a council of the whole church to change it. To which the Pope said, but I'm the Pope. I'm the senior bishop of the whole world. Agree with me, or I shall say you're not proper Christians. The papal legate, taking that message, duly excommunicated the Patriarch of Constantinople, who excommunicated the papal legate. Not Pope Leo, who'd sent him, but the papal legate. Leo promptly died, but after that, the Pope got excommunicated as well. This was all a bit of a pity because probably the papal legate mainly went to see if he could get help from the emperor in the east, defending the western areas from attacks by those Northmen, or Normen as they were being called. But anyhow, we got mutual excommunication, schism, and it's one that's never been undone. However much people may try, it comes down to whether the Pope can decide on behalf of the whole church. One of the things that the Pope held on to that was a document called the Donation of Constantine. This was a document that had come into his hands, which said that the Pope had been given the succession to the empire in the west by Constantine. It was found to be a forgery in the 15th century, and obviously we're going to be a forgery because we know that Constantine never did that, that there was an ongoing empire in the west well after then. But the popes read it and believed it because it fitted with what they thought was the case, that they really were the true successors to the Roman Empire in bringing peace and Christian love to all people, even if it meant having to excommunicate them. In the 9th and 10th centuries, we start to get renewal or reform of monasticism. One form of this came from Cluny. The idea was that instead of individual monasteries being part of the local network and directly under the local bishop, what if you had a network of monasteries, a federation, if you will, all looking back to the founding house? Nothing completely new about this. I mean, certainly Irish monasteries had done exactly that. There's a whole federation of monasteries that looked to Columba as their founder, for example. But this meant eventually there were 300 priories which were exempt from local control, answerable only to their senior abbot, and the senior abbot was answerable to the Pope. This was a great bit of centralisation which the Pope loved. And this was also a place where certain senior churchmen spent their time. One of these was Hildebrand, who became Pope Gregory IV, who reformed the papacy in the 11th century. He argued things like the church should be subject only to the commands of God, not to the ruler. Commands were revealed through the scriptures and canon law. The church, and so Christian society, was to be governed by a hierarchy of clergy. The Pope superior to earthly rulers who should obey him. Oh, and by the way, the selling of church offices was to stop. Clergy themselves, and only clergy, were to appoint the new Pope by the election of the College of Cardinals. By 1075, Pope Gregory VII drew up a statement of clerical power, which again forbade the selling of church offices, clerical marriage, and papal power was declared absolute. Henry IV, who was the Holy Roman Emperor at the time, resisted this and was duly excommunicated. In 1077, he went to Rome and stood in the snow for 3 days in front of the fortress where Gregory was staying. The Pope was forced to forgive him, take him back in, but that apparent humiliation allowed Henry to continue to resist the reforms. So the popes ended up looking to other rulers, such as the Normans of South Italy, and played them off against the Holy Roman Emperor. Imperial power was worn down. The struggle between Pope and Emperor carried on until the 12th century when a compromise was reached. Innocent III, an able man with diplomatic skills, called the Fourth Lateran Council, which set up an efficient education system, but also had things like isolation of the Jews, confining them to ghettos. Back a bit in time, and back in England, in the late 10th century, we have St. Dunstan. He reformed the English church. One of the key things he did was to impose the rule of Benedict on monasteries. He also argued that bishops should be monks first. And in England, some cathedrals, though not all, became monastic. They'd been living together of secular priests, if you will, before then, and then they became monastic. Before then, those secular priests could well have been married. In fact, marriage, the priesthood in England carried on well past the Norman Conquest. Aelred, who was born in the 12th century, was the grandson of a priest, the son of a priest. His misfortune was that in 1095 the Pope had eventually ensured that a council had agreed that if you were the child of priests, you couldn't be ordained, to try and stop money passing down families. clerical celibacy really wasn't absolute at this stage. And so we come to the Norman Conquest of William the Conqueror. William was the son of the unmarried Duke of Normandy, Robert I, by his mistress. Remember, Normandy is the settlement of the Northmen in northern France. They'd been there since Rollo about 100 years. William was a first cousin once removed to Edward the Confessor. William's great aunt, his grandfather's sister, was Edward's mother. She was a Norman. She'd been married to Ethelred the Unready and then married Canute afterwards. And it was her marriage to Ethelred that led to Edward the Confessor. And he'd been on the throne, but William felt he had a perfectly good claim to the throne. What he didn't understand was that the Witan met to decide which of those with the claim to the throne should get it. And they met and decided that Harold Godwinson should get the throne, not William. William appealed to Pope Alexander II for his blessing. That was a smart move, because this meant the Pope could decide who should be the King of England, and he fully expected whoever was the King of England to look to him as their overlord. Remember, the popes have their own lands and are quite happy to be overlords. One aspect of the Norman conquest was the bringing together of even more money into the hands of fewer people. The downside of that is, of course, more people end up poorer. The upside is if there's more money in the hands of fewer, they can spend it on things like building stone churches. Stone churches built all over the country, even in areas where there isn't actually any decent local stone. Either it was brought in or stone churches were built by the not very good local stone. So, for example, in my patch we have Reigate stone, which is greenstand and doesn't stand the test of time. But this is the beginning of the multiplying out of the stone parish churches, which makes England look like it does today.